freedom also means that you must be able to exercise the right of not reporting something when you shouldn't be reporting. We haven't accepted the fact that Pakistan was made in the name of Islam. What are our threats that we perceive? My goals are different, my threats are different, my means are much less. So am I using those means in the best way or not? That is the question then. There have been more wars fought in the 20th century, second half, until now. So that time you had 2 world wars, now you have the entire world at war. I've always said in every case that these sanctions that the Americans impose never give you the benefit because it's only hurting the common man in that country. It's the common man that gets hurt and he remembers that.
Do you think that the US is a declining superpower? What do you see happen in the next 5-10 years?
They are now stuck with the Ukraine. I don't see Ukraine winning.
What do you think the end game is with the war there?
Sell more weapons, remain wealthy.
Why doesn't Europe grow a spine? They destroy the Nord Stream pipeline and they don't do anything about it.
Whose interest is it to let Europe crumble?
America.
Why was Hamas allowed to attack like this?
Yeah. You frame it as allowed to attack.
Yeah.
So, it's a very interesting framing.
How does the common person distinguish between authentic journalism and a media narrative?
You can't.
Welcome to the podcast, sir. Thank you so much for being so gracious with your time. Like I mentioned, 4 years back when we started the podcast, if I were to draw up a list of, let's say, the top 10 people we wanted on the podcast, you were, of course, one of those guests. So thank you and sorry for disrupting your Sunday.
Not at all. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I'm so happy to hear that I was listed out so long ago. And I look forward to a great discussion with you and both of you. And so we'll carry on with this from Sagorika and you.
So first off, I'm very curious how you spend your time. I mean, in a previous life, life would have been on the edge. Tons of responsibilities and like plenty of exciting things. Of course, not all of which you can talk about, publicly. But do you miss that life?
When I retired, that was 21 years ago, I did feel, karne ko kuch nahi, I have nothing to do. I'm sitting at home. And I just didn't know what to do with myself. But I didn't have that feeling that I've lost power, as it were, or that was okay, that, it's over. I thought I'm on a holiday now, I just relax. But as it happened, after towards the end of 2003 when I had retired, and I started getting feelers, okay, come on, why don't you write for us? So in 2004, I started writing. 1 year I spent having a nice holiday, went to see my daughter, went off to see my sister in the United States, did all that. Then moved into being a columnist in the newspapers. And I used to do a fortnightly column for 4 or 5 years. Then the management changed and things changed. The management of the newspapers, I suppose, it changed, and so I gave up after that. Then I joined the Observer Research Foundation, and I've been with them since. It's 19 years. So I do a little bit of work for them. I am now at the age that I am. They don't overload me with anything much. They do most of it themselves. So I'm grateful that I'm with them also, and I'm on my own also, and it's nice to be in a new place in Bangalore, coming away from Gurgaon / Delhi, where I spent most of my life. I was born in Delhi, and my first job was in Delhi, then till I moved to the R&AW. That's when I started moving.
So do you watch a lot of movies and TV series and so on? And dare?
Not really. I don't really enjoy these. Some of them I like to watch. I watch further up to 3 or 4, and
Yeah, Father was awesome.
then I want to give it a little break. It's not gets too intense.
Right. Did you watch IC 814?
I did. I did watch that. And any next question on that?
No, I mean, so I watched it yesterday, and it brought back a lot of anger, actually, thinking back to the kind of things that have happened to us, right? I mean, I was perhaps in the 8th standard at that time, and I was watching this unfold in the news, and there was just so much of anger that how could something like this happen? And on the series as well, we see that that there's raw inputs, there's IB inputs, and everything, right? But somehow that intelligence doesn't materialize to something more tangible, right? In terms of stopping something like that. And I'm sure that you might have seen this many different times, but was that like a particularly frustrating thing?
It was frustrating in the sense that you make a series. You make a series with a purpose. You want to exhibit the truth, as it were, which is fine. That's how it should be. But if you're going to twist it, if you're going to give it an agenda, then I object to that. Because, we don't make agendas by saying I'm making an agenda. You do it by subtle. You make it by hints, by picturization. When you picturize the 3 Indian officers, all unhealthy and tired,
All bumbling.
what does that tell you? And then you see that smart ISI guy roaming around.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah.
How is that Taliban fellow, they were so obnoxious when these chaps were there, and he's shown as a perfectly reasonable,
Suave as well.
suave, accommodating man.
Yeah.
He wasn't. So why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And what was the idea of showing that, torturing that R&AW chap, torturing a Nepali to death in the end? What was that?
Right. I think all of these artistic flourishes, so to speak, all of them sort of betray the mind of a maker, right? I mean, it shows the kind of bent that they have.
You show the R&AW chief sitting in a little cubby hole, all glass windows and everything. Guys who've lived in that room know it wasn't like that. At least itna basic to check karo na.
Right.
How does it look walking into the R&AW headquarters? Yeah. It is not a bazaar. Anybody can walk in and walk it. And in the intelligence organizations, we don't click heels, we don't salute. And they show this chap clicking his heels and walking out. These are small things, but they're disparaging.
Right.
So I think that the whatever the intention was, that's how it came out to me as a show that left a lot to be desired.
Yeah. No, I can quite imagine. I mean, if I was so annoyed with the few things that I could recognize, I mean, you would recognize things at a whole other level for sure, right?
Sure, there were mistakes.
Yeah.
There were shortcomings.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the hijacking would not have occurred. If they had the information on time, if they had been able to prevent the aircraft from taking off from Amritsar, things might have been different. But I can tell you one thing. If the aircraft had been stopped from taking off, and if the terrorists had killed 6 or 7 more people, they'd killed 1 by then, all hell would have broken loose in India. Because you could see on the streets of Delhi, outside Racecourse Road, the Prime Minister's house, dharnas and Siapa and all that sort of demonstrations going on. You're forcing the hand of the government. And you're forcing the hand of the government through the media. The media is the place where it should have stopped. I think freedom also means that you must be able to exercise the right of not reporting something when you shouldn't be reporting.
Right.
Because this is going to anger people. This is going to force the government to making into a hasty decision, which they had to do.
Right.
So we should have had the imagination, shall I say, for lack of a better word. I won't say patriotism, that will take me into a different league. Imagination that this is not right, buddy. I shouldn't be telling the people this.
Right.
Everywhere, all over the countryside, you could see this demonstration. So what does the government do then?
When you think back to those times, right, I mean, the late 90s, the 2000s, I mean, the number of terror attacks that used to happen, it was fairly frequent, right? I mean, couple of years.
Almost every day.
Yeah, exactly.
90s were horrible years.
Horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Absolutely horrible.
So, couple of years after the hijacking.
Why, even the 80s were bad when they
Yes.
had the Sikh militancy.
Yeah.
And then it went on to Kashmir.
Right.
वो एक बंद हुआ दूसरा, the other one started. So we had a terrible time.
Right.
Int agencies, paramilitaries, troops. And what did we get in return from our friends? Allegations of human rights violations.
Yeah.
Ask them about Abu Ghraib now,
Yeah.
What happened there? Or Guantanamo.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for us, it was human rights abuse.
Just a couple of years after the hijacking, we had the parliament attacks. Then we had Akshardham as well. Then the Mumbai train bombings, if you remember.
First, the 2006 bombing,
Yeah.
the serial bombing on the train.
Correct.
And then we had 2008.
Yeah.
And then we had Parliament.
Right.
Parliament was before.
Parliament was 2001, I think.
2001, sorry.
Yeah.
Then you had, after a gap, you had bombing for which we did Balakot,
Oh, Pulwama.
Pulwama.
Right.
But that was much later. Before that, we had Uri, actually.
Right.
Uri and Pulwama was the two things that happened. But you're dealing with terrorists. You're not dealing with gentlemen. You're dealing with Islamic terrorists who have a kind of a license, as it were, to do what they do, because that is the route to Jannat.
Is that an important thing to recognize? Because I feel that somehow, even so, yesterday, I mean, I was just like looking back at the sequence of events, and Aman Ki Asha was launched in 2010, right? And if you remember, it had everyone, right? It had Amitabh Bachchan and so on and so forth. A lot of these advertisements and song and dance and everything, and that just made me a little more frustrated because, given everything that's happened in the 10 years before that, how could we even think about this, right? And I think it goes back to the root of the thing that we don't recognize the real issue here.
We haven't accepted the fact that Pakistan was made in the name of Islam.
Right.
And it is now living in the name of Islam. The parliament is Islamic, army is Islamic, terrorists, of course, are Islamic. Look at the way they treat their own subsects. Look at the way they treat Hindus. Look at the way they treat the Baloch. So they are on a different track from us.
Right.
And I think that all we have to do is to learn to live with Pakistan, learn to deal with Pakistan. Friendship is not something that I think will ever happen, not in this way.
Right. Oftentimes that binary is portrayed, right? I mean, saying that, the Americans have done all of this, they've leveled our, cities and whatnot. And so, I mean, I'm doing this hijacking almost like in the same vein, right? But, from then to now, how do you think the security apparatus has evolved? Because at that time, as you mentioned, I mean, it was harrowing times, right? Literally every few months, few times a year, something like this would happen. And it would happen in cities like Bangalore, Pune. I remember the German bakery blast, for example, right? So on and so forth. From then until now, what has been the change in terms of the security apparatus?
Well, it's difficult for me to comment on what the changes that might have been made. But the most important thing is what is the attitude of the government of today towards terrorism. And what does the government think is the answer to dealing with this? What is the remedy or the recipe for curing this?
Is it so top down? Because some.
No, it's not top down in the sense that, if I believe that I should carry out kinetic operations in the country, or it's an eye for an eye, but the government doesn't believe, then who am I to carry out this?
There just aren't enough incentives.
No, we are a democracy. We are not the ISI. We don't take decisions ourselves. We don't say that we'll go and climb Kargil and tell the Prime Minister later we've done it.
Yeah.
We work in a system. If the Prime Minister says, I will go to Islamabad, whatever you might tell him, it doesn't matter. He's going to go.
Right.
So that is how it works.
Right. How much of, let's say a failure to act on some of this intelligence is just purely baked into the system, because extremely bureaucratic, many different agencies, may have overlapping missions and interests and so on.
It happens. That's a human failure, actually. You can't blame any particular country or agency where Americans have 17 agencies, right? They have 750 to 800 bases, right? They've divided the world into commands. How many wars have they won? Name one. They might have conquered Costa Rica, which doesn't have an army, or sorted out Haiti, which has probably a squadron. But which is the war that they won and come away with in good grace? Can you talk of Vietnam? Korea was a draw. Iraq, Afghanistan, now Ukraine. So, if they can make all these mistakes with all the paraphernalia, they download everything that is there up in the atmosphere, hemisphere, or whatever you call it, stratosphere, down onto your table, and you make mistakes. So, when you have 7 or 8 agencies working together, and there will be mistakes, there will be errors of judgment. And it is not necessary that the government or that the people should know of all these successful operations, of the number of hits that you prevented, the number of terrorist groups that you broke, the number of terrorists you apprehended before they even landed in India. Nobody knows. Because if we tell the people that this is how it is, we were doing this, we captured so-and-so, Imtiaz Khan in that place. Now the other side is watching. They'll know how did they get to know. They'll work backwards. They'll say this is how they picked up this guy.
So the channel is completely
Channel
gone.
is closed.
Yeah. You mentioned this in your book as well, that
Yeah.
better be known for its failures than for all the successes.
We have to just take it on the chin and move on.
It's a very stoic job, if I can say that.
It is very exciting when it's going your way.
Right.
Then suddenly things go awry,
Right.
and just pause, think back, turn around. If you've worked out a second strategy, it's good. If you haven't, then you're in for the high jump.
Right. So kind of like playing chess, always thinking like a few
Yeah,
moves ahead.
you have to think of a couple of moves, at least 3 or 4 or 5 moves ahead.
Right. How do you think our intelligence agencies stack up against, let's say, the US or even Pakistan?
Well, I'm frequently asked this question, and I've got the same reply. The thing is, what are our threats that we perceive? What are the threats that the Americans have that they perceive that they are their threats? Now it's a global power. It has interests everywhere, all over the globe. Like I said earlier, that they have 750, 800 bases, military bases. Do you know how many men they're serving in the Kabul office? 700. 700. You're collecting intelligence. Now, this is the manpower they've deployed. This is the superstructure they've got, the technical means to do it. So how do I compare myself with them? My goals are different. My threats are different. My means are much less. So am I using those means best, in the best way or not? That is the question then.
Right.
If I'm able to say that, with all these handicaps, I was able to tell you that the Pakis are going to attack you on the 3rd of December, 1971.
Yeah. Which was a very significant milestone.
Yes. So that is your ability. What is happening in Guatemala, I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned what's happening in North Korea even. I'm not bothered. It's Africa, we should be taking interest, but we probably not. And because as our country does better economically and we move up the ladder, we will have a lot of envy, we'll have a lot of obstructions, and we will have to hunt for our markets and resources. So our intelligence priorities will have to alter, and the means of collection are changing. The technology is going haywire.
Yeah. That's actually something I wanted to ask you about, which is you lay a lot of emphasis on human intelligence, and you say that's the core of espionage and so on. But we're also living at these times where pagers can be set to explode and so on and so forth.
It's true. Technology is running amok. Ray Kurzweil, I've quoted in my book, Singularity is Near. He had said that by 2025, human intelligence and artificial intelligence will be equal. He's written a subsequent book. He has said the same thing again, that it is now going to be superior to human intelligence. And by the mid-30s, your time, the human mind will be linked technologically with artificial intelligence. Your brain will be linked with that. So who's going to control?
Yeah, a few of these.
When it goes rogue, what happens?
Yeah. So in the last couple of years, ChatGPT has passed the Turing test, right? We also have Neuralink, which Elon Musk's company, which directly links to the brain, right? And a lot of these developments, we kind of think of it linearly, but it's always happened in exponential growth.
Yes, it's geometric progression.
Yeah.
And artificial intelligence or technology will suddenly hit you so hard because it grows exponentially, as you say. The Americans were researching on a thing they called Stardust for DARPA, their agency. They sprinkle it on the ground, on the grass in a target area. Each one of them acts as a communication, listening device and communicator. And your UAVs are going to be the size of bumblebees. So how are you going to control all that? But behind all that is a human mind, no? So far, our technology is not self-inventing. Somebody is doing it.
Right.
Somebody is doing the research on the biological thing. Somebody was researching for COVID, wasn't he?
So you still think that, let's say, cultivating assets in a different country, understanding our strategic priorities, and sort of moving all of these different things in motion will be like an acutely human thing.
Let's assume that you are the raw agent and I am your target. Huh?
Okay.
Okay, you are me and I'm you. You want to cultivate me. You know that I have got access to a certain nuclear facility and you want to cultivate me. Now the thing is, I come and give you the information. That we've got these kinds of bombs. Yeah. So you've established that these chaps have got the capability.
Right.
The technology you got hold of. But how do you know when I'm going to use it? Or if I'm going to use it? How far will you go to tell the government, no, it's okay. We know this guy. We know him personally. He's a timid fellow. He won't do it. आप कर सकते हो. Or you will tell him, be careful. This chap is erratic. Or he's an adventurous fellow. तो चला देगा. पहले ही चला देगा. You can get it only through humans. You can't get it from reading all
Signals
the
and so on. Yeah.
So human intelligence will always play a part in the final lap, as it were, in a race.
The discretionary element.
The discretionary, the mental breakup, the mindset, all those things you need to know.
Right.
Plus, how do you know in the first place that you have to contact me? If you hadn't done it, you wouldn't have got that information.
Right.
So these linkages will remain important. The difficulty is everybody's under technological surveillance now. The speed at which information is traveling, or the amount it is traveling, that is difficult to beat.
Right. What do you think we should do to kind of level up on the defense and technology capabilities? One of the things that we've seen in recent years is the whole Defense Acquisition Council and this focus on Atmanirbhar Bharat and so on, right? So a lot of private organizations are being encouraged to sort of supply to the armed forces, as it were. Is there anything else that you can do from a policy perspective to sort of amplify this further?
Well, I would think that we have to go private, because that's where the technological brains are. That's where the innovation is. ISRO is a different example. But if you're going to develop your own weaponry, your own tanks or aircraft, then you got to rely on some corporate interest in that. And we should give up that old Nehruvian idea that profits are evil. Profits are the ways that life goes.
Yeah. And that the government will build everything, right?
Yeah. Government shouldn't. Government can't.
Right. So there are many different aspects that we'll delve upon. One of these things is, of course, that's critical to us is regional stability. With everything that's happening around us, there's more instability than stability. So I'm going to pass it over to Sagorika to, talk us through this section.
Thank you, Roshan. So we've discussed this, and Bangladesh is happening even as we speak, even though we can say that the majority of the tumult is past, the political tumult. Do you think India was caught off guard when it comes to Bangladesh?
It's not fair for me to tell you, to comment on this. I don't know what happened. I was not there. But it seems that it was quite apparent that Sheikh Hasina was losing popularity. She was on a downward slope. And since Bangladesh and our neighboring countries are some places that we really keep a good watch on, I doubt if they didn't know that the days are numbered. But I'm not sure how accurately they could assess that aaj hoga, ke kal hoga, ke will happen in the next month. So I don't think they were caught off guard. It's just that you sometimes don't have the means to stop a tidal wave that is coming. And the manner in which the army chief asked her to go is actually a coup.
Absolutely.
And the quick cover was the Ghulam, what is his name, Mustafa, what I always forget the chief of the interim government.
The Muhammad Yunus.
Muhammad Yunus. Yunus was brought in. Yeah?
Almost on cue.
On cue.
So with Muhammad Yunus being brought in, a lot of his cabinet are actually from Grameen Bank. They have been awarded US State Department awards. Of course, the student movement that we can see is no longer a student movement. Despite that, there is no call out to the country behind the chaos. You know, very few people have called out a US intervention, and even Muhammad Yunus being the plant there is not sufficient
But
evidence.
who do you think would call that out? In the neighborhood, no one will do it.
For example, despite a lack of evidence, Canada cites Chinese. I mean, they have evidence for Chinese interference, but they also cite Indian interference in their elections.
Yeah. No, but these are all selective accusations.
Absolutely. But is there no way with this much evidence that mainstream media or perhaps people in certain positions are able to call it out or at least imply for the sake of Bangladesh and its regional and India's regional stability?
I don't think, you see, in our neighborhood, nobody was going to do it. The Chinese have accused the Americans, as far as I remember. The rest of the world couldn't care less. I mean, if the people of the world are not so involved with Ukraine, why would they bother about this country? That leaves only us, actually. It leaves only us.
Us is really what I mean.
Us is what you really meant, and I was going around in circles. But the thing is, who in the government can say that I have proof that you did it? We don't. And if you have the proof, the normal way would have been to go and tell them. But you don't have the proof. This is all an assessment people have made, that this is how it was done, that Daniel Liu was coming, etc., etc., and the High Commission, the ambassador was also involved. But how do you tell anybody that you have done it?
I mean, I think Shishir Gupta was used for the Hindustan Times piece on earlier for Panun being a CIA operative.
Uh-huh.
So there are, I'm sure the government has ways of placing information, but I'm just surprised that literally there is no mainstream accusation about US intervention, despite the Prime Minister herself calling out a white man, whether that's Donald Liu or Peter Haas is a different matter, but she has been the Prime Minister, and her being treated like a regular layperson and not being listened to.
No, I think the Indians would probably want to play it out a little more. They would probably wait for the next government to come in.
We did kind of allude to it, though. I think Dr. Jaishankar, happened to speak about the state of Bangladeshi Hindus with someone from the US. I don't know if it was Mr. Blinken or someone else. Right?
He has done that, yes.
Sort of alluding to the fact that US has a stake in the matter, right? So, yeah.
So we have to play it a little softly, I think. And since our relations with the United States are a little
icy,
tricky, we all say we are good best friends, but I'm not sure whether, this latest thing about putting
Friends
the
can be
NSA on the list of, deliberately done, and then the delegation meets Biden before Biden meets the president, meets the prime minister. That's signaling, that is messaging.
How does India respond? What is our scope just because of the power differential here?
Mm-hmm.
We've stood up a few times.
Yes, we
but
have.
This is an attack directly on our sovereignty, one can say, because meeting Khalistani delegates right before meeting the Prime Minister, ensuring that the NSA does not travel to the US because there's a case against him filed by Panun himself.
Yes.
So how does India respond?
That is a terrible signal to send. Well, I'm sure they have means of retaliation. What is the bargain that they will have, Americans? What do they want from us? They want
We
us
aren't
to.
buying.
They want us now to ban Russia Today, Russia TV. They want us to not go around shaking hands and hugging Putin or buying oil, which they themselves then buy from us and sell it elsewhere. So I'm not sure where this is going. I would think that we're just waiting for, hopefully, for a change of government, maybe, or a change
Eric,
of leadership there.
sorry, Eric Garcetti has himself, just like Peter Haas in Bangladesh, Eric Garcetti, being ambassador to India, has been part of quite a lot of these issues,
Messaging.
messaging,
Yeah.
literally been placed here to do the messaging, which is very anti-host nation. How involved is intelligence typically in all these kinds of signaling? Is it plainly
No, this
political?
is a diplomatic thing. This is not an IB thing or anything. This is what the American ambassador is saying. He's saying, and the reply would go only from the Foreign Office, nowhere else.
But when you pursue a strategic interest, I mean, do these intelligence agencies not layer that with their own inputs on what's actually happening on the ground and so on? Like, let's say, if the Foreign Office has to do X or Y things, they have a mission. Do you think that they might also seek inputs from the RAW and so on?
Yeah, sometimes I do ask what would be the repercussions, what are your assessments. If we have an assessment, we'll give. So there is always consultation, but this is not if there are visiting an ambassador is making a comment, making a statement. Its response is never from the intelligence agency. The response has to be from the Foreign Office, which I think they're pretty good at. These days they are a little more aggressive than they were in the past 10 years before the last. This government has been little more, not a little, actually quite a bit aggressive in the responses.
I do want to say that we've discussed this previously as well on a questioning mind, but can we not be doing more? Because the pressures are also most on this government, just for the lack of pliancy, one could say. And apart from buying cheap Russian oil, which is a necessity for Indians, and just standing by that without being rude at all, the kind of targeted harassment, honestly, at this point, meeting Khalistani delegates, meeting the leader of opposition, clearly talking about the balkanization of the nation, hosting people who support this idea on government stages. It can be construed as an attack on India's sovereignty, and we're hardly post-colonial. It's not even been a century. As such, is it too much to expect that India has a clearer response?
You can look at it two ways. One is that there are certain countries who look at India with a certain amount of fear, maybe, or trepidation. As it rises, it becomes more involved in the outside world. It will seek more markets. It will replace other people's markets. It will demand or seek resources that the others want. And then the economic power leads to political power and military power. Can you have two Asian countries together like this? They made a mistake by encouraging China to become what it has, globalization. Then they themselves got into the 2008 financial crisis. The Chinese continued happily. It's now that they're slowing down a bit, but they're still ahead of us, way ahead of us. But for a democracy to follow the kinds of systems that the Chinese did, we can't do it. Therefore, they are able to pressurize you in many ways to slow down.
So
That is what I think is happening.
democracy and a power differential getting
Yes.
in the way. All right.
They
Well,
are,
that makes sense, I think.
that is what they want to do. They want to keep you be low life. Don't have too many ambitions.
And I'm just going to cross over a little bit into the narrative aspect as well, because we've had India out campaigns in Bangladesh before the interim government taking over. We had that previously in Maldives successfully enough. But just it's purely the economic dependency on India that has caused Maldives and Bangladesh to turn around and try and take back their words. But this has succeeded. This sort of narrative building around India out, promoted by China. How does India fare in this regard about building a sort of pro-India or anti-China narrative? I'm pretty sure we don't do any anti-anything, but I'm not sure about that. I mean, no better person to ask. But
No, I wouldn't know what they've been doing the last 20 years. But I still don't think that we were doing absolutely nothing and letting this go out of our hands. It is usually you want to be friends with the distant power, not with the neighboring power, because the neighboring power is a threat. The distant power can be your friend. So politically, each leader wants to be closer to China. Okay, they won't conquer us, they would not do this, but these Indians might do that. They got a wretched navy that can swamp in. Remember, we did that in 1989 when there was a coup in the Maldives and we moved in the overnight and stopped it. They don't forget. We did the most help that we gave during tsunami was the Indian Navy. Okay? It was a noble gesture, it was a brilliant gesture, it was a friendly gesture. But it also means that they have the power. Okay? Bangladesh is surrounded on three sides by the Indians. Yeah? They don't do anything, but they can, because what they did in other places. Remember, the Indian army helped the Mukti Bahini break Pakistan. So they remember that negative aspect.
why has that, which was an immensely positive aspect for the Bangladeshis themselves, why has that suddenly become a negative aspect? It's not now, it's not you stating it, and it's not after the coup, because there were a lot of college students, I've watched interviews in Bangla ages ago, who literally did cite Indian interference instead of, Indian assistance in independence, which was the initial narrative. That's what the Awami League has always maintained, which is what initial textbooks maintained, that India was the sister nation that offered freedom and independence. Because people don't remember this, but the Bengalis were treated horribly. The Bengali Muslims from East Pakistan were terribly mistreated by the Punjabi Pakistani management, so administration, which is why the entire movement came about. So how did this get turned around on its head?
You know, what was the original name of the Awami League? Muslim Awami League. Okay. Who started the debacle, the riots in August 1946? Hussain Muhammad Shurawardi from Bangladesh, now Bangladesh, that time Bengal. He started it. And the original demand of the Awami League was on language, only language, and 5 other points of greater autonomy. It's when the Pakistanis made that stupid mistake of not letting Sheikh Mujib run the government that laid the basis for Bangladesh. Okay? Then we know all the events that took place. And the Bihari Muslims, the Jamaat-e-Islami now, were in favor of the Pakistanis even then. 2.5 years after Bangladesh became independent. Sheikh Mujib and his family was slaughtered in his house. No, 72 he took over, 75 he died. December 16, 1975, he landed in Dhaka. And August 75, he was gone. 2.5 years. What happened? He was done in by the Islamists, backed by the army, who then took over. After from the Khankar Mushtaq for a little while, then Zia Rahman, martial law, Khalida Zia, Hussain, I'm not just naming them, not the sequence. Hussain Muhammad Irshad, they were running the government. Sheikh Hasina came for one term, then was knocked out again, and then we had Khalida Zia running the government. So, how many years of independence has it been run by, let's say, an India-loving party?
So the idea of Pakistan has been constantly there, just bubbling under the surface, and it's a societal issue. Well, that makes sense.
I don't know whether they want to join up with Pakistan again, or is it a kind of a threat to us, a bargaining chip? But Pakistan is also in no position to help them. What everybody wants is chaos. Sab jagah.
You did call it organized chaos.
Yeah.
So why?
Engineered chaos,
Engineered.
organized chaos.
Okay, engineered chaos.
Just look around the world. We had two world wars. Before and after that, how many years of peace have we had? There have been more wars fought in the 20th century, second half, particularly after the Cold War ended until now. So that time you had two world wars, now you have the entire world at war. Africa, Latin America, Eurasia, Arab Peninsula, the trouble here, trouble in Pakistan. Trouble here means Bangladesh, trouble in Pakistan. Afghanistan is on a trip of its own. So where is the peace? Why is this chaos set in this fashion? Why did the Hamas do that attack? How did they do it? You know, if you think about it, think harder and deeper, and you say, Israel is a country which has the best intelligence coverage in the world, perhaps. It has an existential fear from its Arab leaders. How did this happen?
How do you think it happened?
So, there are conspiracy theories. I'm not sure that.
Well, you can call it a conspiracy theory. Then how did Hezbollah happen?
So one end of
How is it that the Israelis were able to kill those three guys of Hamas pinpointed in Tehran and couldn't see this one, October 7th?
All right, so since you are mentioning it, I'm just going to lay it out. But there are talks that, this feels horrible saying it, but that October 7th laid the ground for what is going on now and the ultimate destruction of Hamas and Hezbollah, even though Hezbollah has struck back and killed 38 Israeli IDF soldiers today, I think, earlier today. So is that a real possibility?
I don't know what the possibility is, but somehow I cannot understand how this was allowed to happen. The Americans told their people, American citizens, don't go to Moscow, there is a threat, terrorist threat. Remember? That city in the suburb in Moscow was attacked by a terrorist. some months ago,
Yes, yes,
It
yes.
was in a mall, I think.
That was
More.
Yeah.
a long
right?
yeah.
Few months back.
They had that intelligence. They have 17 agencies. They have all the coverage in the world. They didn't know Hamas was going to attack.
So I think you had only previously mentioned this on a different talk that sometimes intelligence gets lost and does not reach the right ears, and may have been the case here. Is that a likely explanation that there was intelligence, but it just wasn't
Mm.
Yeah, maybe that's how it happened.
right? I'm giving
Maybe
a
that's how it
ramp
happened.
off, but. All right, coming to Myanmar, also a very unstable part of our neighborhood. Um, it's affecting the northeastern states, and Manipur is burning as well. How much of this is China engineered, and how can Indian intel help here? How is India prepared for this sort of chaos on all sides?
You know, what is happening in Myanmar, our northeast plus Myanmar are the two regions we have neglected all along, from day one. It's sort of, you're down there, because Myanmar was not like Pakistan. We have roughly the same length of border, little less, but they never attacked us. They never sent guerrillas. They never sent jihadis. So we just thought, okay, isko. ये तो Southeast Asian hai. Now that the Chinese have moved in, now we are worried. It could have been the other way. Had we paid more attention to the Northeast and to Burma, we would have been in a much better position today. Burma is Myanmar, sorry. Myanmar is a country which has a lot of affinity or similarity with India. If you've been to Pagan, you would see the temples that are built. All the temples, many of the Buddhist temples have Ganesh at the gate for good luck. The Anand temple looks like a typical South Indian temple. Absolutely. It could be Madurai or anywhere like that. But we've lost it because we neglected it. We didn't pay enough attention to it. We could have sold them dal and sabzi from across the border and bought their rice cheap and fed the northeast instead of giving subsidized rice from Delhi. Huh? We didn't think of all these things.
Even though it's not a hot
Now,
button.
if the Chinese are there in large numbers, and the drugs are there. The drugs are there in the Shan state. They've been there for ages. They're still there. Heroin trade is going on. This trade from Manipur through Chin area is going on. So, wherever you have terrorism, you have drugs. We have terrorism, we have drugs, you have terrorism. It works. They use the same channels, they use the same money to survive. So, unless you cut the money route, it won't stop. पैसा नहीं होगा तो लड़ेंगे कैसे? If you go and get weapons, you go and get money to feed your soldiers or insurgents, then how do you tackle that? It is the idea of building their lives and rebuilding them and rehabilitating them all comes later. First you must quell the militancy. Just saying that, Acha, I'll give you this land, you can grow potatoes here. But the fellow makes more money selling opium seed, not potatoes. So Afghanistan is full of that. And then they sell it across. comes to India.
Afghanistan has been the hotspot for sending weapons now that have been left behind
Yes,
by
now a lot
the
of left
US.
behind weapons they have been giving away.
Um,
So this is
so,
part of chaos strategy, no? किसी का weapon कहाँ मिल गया पहुँच गया, you don't know. Africa is fighting. They all either civil wars or insurgencies or that's going on. And it's all for either the minerals that they have or the oil and gas that they have in South Sudan, the uranium in Niger. These are all interests that keep these non-governmental interests who want to be overlords alive, who want to keep to make their money instead of letting the government and the people make money. So we are lucky that after independence we have remained a democracy. Where else? What has happened to Pakistan? What has happened to Bangladesh? What has happened to Myanmar? Others are wobbly democracies in our neighborhood.
you mentioned neglects and wobbly democracies. Um, Last question before I hand it back to Roshan for a bigger picture instead of just the neighborhood. But Nepal, is that a place that you think we've sometimes neglected? And despite very, very common culture, we've allowed a lot of anti India sentiments and political issues coming between very, very possibly a very good friend.
Two or three things have happened in Nepal, I think. One is that we were very arrogant with them in the beginning, and treating them with not contempt but indifference, and doing things like imposing sanctions on them. Remember, I think it was Rajiv Gandhi's time. They wanted to buy something from China and we imposed an embargo, right? Stopped. And Nepal was dependent only on us for food. You don't do that to a small neighbor. You find other ways of solving it. You don't want him to buy those weapons. Yeah, that's not something you want to do. I agree there. But this is, people remember this because the common man gets hurt. I've always said in every case that these sanctions that the Americans impose never give you the benefit because it's only hurting the common man in that country. It's not hurting the government. Government is quite happy. They'll make money. They'll import it and send it off as subsidies or whatever they will do, but they will do it. It's the common man that gets hurt, and he remembers that. And being a poor country, the Chinese being cleverer, they encouraged Marxism. It caught on. And it became quite a cult to be a communist in Nepal. So we've got communism, we've got this big brother attitude. The Chinese have been more subtle about it, although they're not going to let them loose on economic or financial matters when that push comes to shove. So they are the only Hindu kingdom, and we should have treated it as one, cherished it, nurtured it, let it become big. तो हमारा जो डेमोक्रेसी का वो था ना, that zoom or that we must have democracies everywhere. Democracies can go haywire, no?
Yeah. There are always these various interests vying for power in any particular
And it's easy to
country,
play
right?
these cards. The other chap will take it and say, "Acha, you want, I'll give you 10 more scholarships, I'll give you that," and then bit by bit it goes.
When Prime Minister Modi came to power, I think one of the first trips he made externally was to Pashpat. Pashupatinath Mandir as well, and we gave some grants to the temple as well there. So, okay, moving beyond just the region, there's just so much happening everywhere else across the world as well. Let me start with the US. Do you think that the US is a declining superpower? What do you see happen in the next 5-10 years?
I think you ought to wait for my next book. Though it's still.
Can you give us a little bit of a
I do say that the US is not what it was in 1950, let's say. It is not what it was in 1989.
Culturally, we can.
Paradoxically, it has lost most of its standing after Russia collapsed. You don't have an enemy, na?
So not sharp enough. Yeah.
Yeah, a superpower must have an enemy to thrive.
Right.
If you don't have an enemy, what do you do?
Stretching itself too thin.
Scratch yourself to glory and ruin yourselves. Imaginary fights here and there.
Culturally, we. Sorry.
One more thing. A superpower, or maybe every power, you get carried away by your own dialogue about yourself.
You drink your own Kool-Aid.
You think you are the God's
God's gift.
chosen, God's favorite country. And you underestimate the other fellow.
Right.
Now we can take care of them. We got 20 divisions, and we got this bomb, we got that. It doesn't work. Particularly with the Russians, who have shown time again that you can't defeat us. We may not win all battles, but you can't defeat us. Napoleon couldn't, Hitler couldn't, and the Americans won't be able to. So they are now stuck with the Ukraine. I don't see Ukraine winning.
What do you think the end game is on that?
Sorry?
What do you think the end game is with the war there?
Yes, we will find another war.
Right. Another cause.
Another cause. This will get shelved off, put into on the back burner, and we find another location for another war, which will be just as necessary for the American interest. American interest क्या है? Sell more weapons, remain wealthy.
So all of this is for the industrial complex, basically.
They will make money. They're already there in Ukraine. BlackRock and others have gone there, buying off things or setting up industry. The money will go to BlackRock accounts or the company's accounts. They not come to the Ukrainian, but they just get that building or get a school. The money will go back to America. First you give money so that you can have the weaponry used. When the weapons dry out, you build new weapons. Then you do reconstruction and you make money. There was a very nice article by a chap called William Pfaff. He wrote in 1995, I think, or somewhere that time. He says the Americans have two departments: Department of Destruction and Department of Construction. Pentagon destroys, state reconstructs. Both times the Americans gain. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it sounds very, very plausible to me.
So over the last 5-10 years, we keep hearing of this term called the deep state, right? I think Trump has popularized it, and then of course, quite a few commentators right now seem to use that phrase quite colloquially in conversation as such.
Gary Sarkar.
So, do you think that, there is that conception of a deep state? There is that one, the people in the shadows sort of orchestrating everything, and it's a government beyond government as such? Do you think there is such a thing?
I think there are a lot of vested interests in the government in the United States and in other countries, similar patterns, but smaller ones. You see, the Americans have a very nice system of governance. I am today the chief of, I am an ambassador in Moscow. Tomorrow I am director CIA. After I retire, I'll join some think tank. Then I'll go into the corporate world, be an MD of some company which is feeding into the system. And then I'll quit that, and then the next government comes, I'm back in government. There are lots of these guys, a lot of them, who perpetually in the levers of power. So I don't think there is an address to the deep state or a location to the deep state. There is a mindset. कि कंट्रोल करना है तो ऐसे ही करना है. You know, where is the money? Where is the power? What's in it for me or us? So it goes in circles.
Right. So there's a strategic intent behind all of these.
Strategic intent, they've decided the Council on Foreign Relations is considered to be the second State Department, they say, or the State Department of the Wall Street. So they all mesh in very nicely.
So I have to ask you this. Do you think any of these these different agencies and whatnot, I mean, do you think they are behind some of these assassination attempts on Trump? On Trump, potentially?
I don't know. I don't know that. Really, I don't know. I think it would be very foolish if they were just doing this and not succeeding. I mean, you would do it properly. Otherwise, what is this? Amateurish ways of doing it. So I don't think they would. But in America, every guy roams around with a gun and pot shots.
Right. But you don't have to actually like construct a detailed plan as such, right? I mean, you could turn a blind eye, which I think a lot of people are saying is what happened in the first assassination attempt, where there was a line of sight with the shooter, but everyone was told to kind of hold off until after, right? And then he was shot immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what was the game that they're playing. It just keeps interest alive in the election campaign. Maybe he was doing it to get popularity. I don't know.
Right. So we see a massive alliance emerging, which is the whole Russia and China thing. Velina, who you spoke to on the podcast earlier, she calls it Dragon Bear, right? Where Russia has moved closer to China right now, and they've sort of become, I won't say codependent, but at least exchanging value, right? So, what do you think that will have as an impact to the rest of the world?
But if Russia can hold out in Ukraine without too much of degradation of quality of its forces and economic.
But the Russians are hardy people, right? They'll survive on bread and water.
And what you can see, what the shots that they show of Moscow is a very fine, bustling, peaceful city.
Fine,
Look at London. Look at Berlin.
1 rape per hour was the last estimate.
This is what's going on and you have all these fellows blocking traffic on Oxford Street and doing their namaz or Muharram ka. So this is in Poland, all safe, no jagda, nothing. Czechoslovakia, all these smaller countries, they're looking after themselves. So this woke life and this, we must look after the immigrant. He's not coming here for a job. He's coming here to rule over you. You know what one, I think I've got it in my book somewhere. A Islamic scholar, they'd gone to a conclave in the Vatican. And there he told one of the pastors, the Vatican hierarchy, I don't know. He said, by your democracy we shall come to you. By our religion we shall control you, dominate you. Well, that's happening. Russians are safe in that sense. A Russia-China alliance with Russia with all the resources natural resources it has, and with the Arctic now opening out, it can still become a source of supply of gas to all of Europe, because the American gas is going to be more expensive, and this chap will undercut the Americans. So a Russia-China alliance will be a hugely successful alliance. Let's not compare the weapons that these guys might hold, which may be not as good as the Americans. But so what? The American superiority is not enough to conquer them.
Why doesn't Europe grow a spine? I mean, they destroy the Nord Stream pipeline and they don't do anything about
They
it.
don't do anything about it.
Right? There is all of this mass immigration, which clearly the locals don't want, but somehow it continues to happen, right?
Okay, let's look at it like this. Whose interest is it to let Europe crumble?
America? No.
Huh? So, isn't this chaos engineered? Why do you want that Ukraine battle to continue? But the Russians are quite ready to talk peace. But they don't want it. Right from the time of the Minsk agreements, 1 and 2, the Americans have not let Ukraine run their policy. And remember, soon after the Cold War was over, collapse of Russia, Soviet Union, William Baker, the Secretary of State, assured the Russians, NATO shall not move an inch eastward. Inch. And look at them now. They don't even talk about it. Oh, that was another context. Blah, blah, blah. Putin told them several times, don't do Ukraine. William Burns, ambassador Moscow में था, he wrote a letter or a telegram to Washington. Ukraine is a niet. But nahi. And now you don't know how to solve it. Because loss of face हो जाएगा.
So status quo will continue on that front.
I think they will come to some agreement as government का change होने के बाद होगा.
Right. So sadly, that's not the only major war that's afoot right now. We also have the Israel-Palestine war as well.
That's a
hot
big
war.
one. That's a big one.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that the Iranians have not done anything yet. Is it something huge they are planning, or is it that they're just paper tigers? Let the Hezbollah die, let the Hamas die, and we'll just take happily in Iran? Because if they don't do anything, then they are going to be seen as losers by default.
But is it the distance that separates them? I mean, do you think that it would have been different if they were perhaps like...
No, how did they equip both these Hamas and Hezbollah? How did they manage that?
But they're proxies, basically.
They are proxies. They are Iranian proxies. Hamas was actually a Sunni outfit and won the elections in Palestine, Gaza. So, and the Israelis had left it, gone. But no, we got to destroy Israel is the motto. So kar lo phir.
Roshan, if I may, Karan, I have a question from one of the viewers, and there is also some sort of idea that because Hamas is a Sunni outfit and is protected by Qatar, and Hezbollah a more Shia outfit, it seems like Israel has more of a go-ahead on Hezbollah. whereas at points it might seem like Hamas is in American protectorate territory. Even though anything that Israel is doing is against American interests at this point, do you think that there is any modicum of truth to this?
I don't know. It sounds plausible that Hamas, with Qatar money coming in, why even Israelis had contributed some money to via Qatar to the Hamas. So there could be a belief that Hezbollah is the one that you should get, but I thought that the Hamas was. Why was Hamas allowed to attack like this? I mean, I've asked this question again and again to myself. Nobody has an answer really.
Would you frame it?
How could in a country which is so well protected, didn't know this?
Yeah. You frame it as allowed to attack.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting framing.
It is that. So, what was the actual motive? Was it Hamas or Hezbollah? I don't even know that now. Was it Hezbollah by hitting Hezbollah, you're hitting Iran? So will that flare up? God knows. Chaos. सब जगह chaos है.
Yeah.
I have a question that sounds very basic, and I had neglected to ask it, but Thiru from behind the camera actually decided that it's a very good question. How does the common person distinguish between authentic journalism and a media narrative?
You can't. If the man is clever, you'll never know that he's selling an agenda and he's got a narrative. But you can only know, not at first sight, but you can know the way he writes, what he writes on, how he covers a particular incident, how he covers a particular story that you heard it differently and you're getting a different angle. He's selling a particular line, he's selling a particular story. But one-off meeting, you will never know. You'll have to study the person.
But do you think these folks in the media or, these NGOs, so on and so forth, right? I mean, do you think they're all ideologically driven, or do you think there's an element of
Many of them start off with ideals. And then they become ideologues. Because the power of money controls what you do. If the donor says, sorry, कल से नहीं मिलेगा कुछ, unless you take protest march or sell a particular line or write a particular article which you're not agreeing with, but you have to do it because that is the policy. Then eventually they take over. That's how they take over, no? First entice, give money, give long rope, and then suddenly start pulling back.
So this is something you've written about extensively. But considering that Nazi propaganda has been so well covered, and we know that in communist nations, media, narratives, all stories are incredibly well controlled. In imperialist nations like Britain, all of these stories are so well controlled. Why is it still not priority for other nations, especially nations like ours? I'm not sure that at this point we can be calling ourselves particularly weak, but other nations such as ours do not consider it enough of a game changer because even regime changes can be organized through that, as we've seen in the Spring Revolution in Arab nations, we've seen in the color revolutions in Ukraine. So why is it not given priority, do you think?
No, I don't think it's a lack of priority. It's a lack of means to spread your word. Americans spread their word through Bollywood, Hollywood. They do it through their newspapers, which they say are the best in the world, because they can say so and their voice reaches everywhere. How has Ukraine war been covered all these months in the Indian newspapers?
With a completely American tilt.
Completely American. So that's their reach. Do we have a reach like that? Do you think Hindustan Times articles will appear in as on the op-ed page or on page 8 of International News of Asia of New York Times? No. Unless it is a negative story. हमारे पास, we don't have the means. Where is who listens? Do you think people in United States listen to Republic TV, watch Republic TV and Times Now and so on and so forth? Maybe the Indian diaspora does, but not the American. We get CNN here, we get France TV, we get BBC, we get all of them here. And then they want us to stop Russia today.
I'm just to play. I'm not actually playing the devil's advocate. I think there's a lack of political will as well, because mainstream media, and especially after COVID, we've seen a rise with Republic TV and other Indian channels, WION, getting an international reach, reaching out to the best in international scholarship, sometimes getting them here. So at least slowly there is some international reach.
I would grant you that. Except that is a voice heard here. Is that the same voice heard in, say, Paris or New York? Would that clip be seen in the drawing rooms of Fifth Avenue, New York?
Could it be seen if there were a political drive behind it? Just because I do think that media...
Who will give the political drive? You mean here?
Yeah, or any nationalistic corporate drive or any sort of combined willpower. Is there something that is lacking? Because even
would they even contemplate or think that they should have our relations with India are so good, such a powerful country, we should have their channel on our systems, on our platforms.
Just as a follow-up to that, right? I mean, it might cost us a few tens, if not some hundreds of crores to sort of influence opinion, and if not like New York and Paris and so on, but let's say Dhaka and Kathmandu and Colombo and so on, right? So we should be able to influence opinion positively in our region at least.
They all watch, I believe, in Pakistan TV, in all neighboring countries, they watch Indian channel. That's what I don't know whether they watch news channels, but they watch all the entertainment channels. Well, that's influence in a way, but it's not political influence. It's conditioning the mind but we cannot, if we do not have this in the West, we're not going to be able to sell ourselves, sell our product. They're 90% of American news channels, media is controlled by 6 or 7 groups. So they say they are free, but they're free in a different way.
So this is what I was asking, because those are private-owned groups, and we have private-owned groups, but there is no cohesion when it comes to messaging that is completely nationalistic, despite being from the nation. That's something that's lacking. And frankly, they also play to their domestic audience. The elites that read it here are less than 1%. The New York Times, the Washington Post, they're read by their own domestic audiences to probably build consensus for the wars that they're fighting, for the military-industrial complex that is getting wealthier. But when it comes to India, can we not have a cohesive messaging when it comes to matters that impact foreign policy, at least? For example, the Khalistan issue, the issue of Kashmir, even today being discussed as a bargaining chip rather than as part of...
No. We make a first-rate TV production, serial, on Kashmir, just sort of arguing the point, asking. So you've done it. We've done a Pulitzer Prize winner, or whatever you would call it, Brookings Award, worthy of that. Will it be seen in the United States? Will we be able to sell it there? Who will buy it to put it up in his channel in Houston or San Diego? खरीदार चाहिए ना. You can have the diaspora showing it to each other, but diaspora, so it is again limiting it, not showing it to the American, you're showing it to the Indian American.
उपाय क्या है? What is the solution? Because
No, you just have to keep trying. One day it'll click.
the
Because
corporate
they came into a vacuum here. We had Doordarshan and we had sometime, then we went public, private, we had Star TV for some time, then Z or NDTV came in. We began and then suddenly we said, hey, Al Jazeera bhi aa jao, ye bhi aa jao, wo bhi aa jao. We allowed them. Without allowing your own channels to flourish properly, you allowed these chaps to come in also. Not that I watch BBC. I don't watch BBC. I don't watch CNN. I don't enjoy watching them. It doesn't make any sense to me. But that's how it is. We were a vacuum, fertile ground and they had a motive to convert.
the reporting is almost aggressively egregious. It's horrific because my last video I just mentioned a statistic. Even if you go to the sources that journalistic media uses, Statista, which is one of the most used platforms for data, they
Which one?
cite Statista is a platform where they
Okay.
have a lot of statistics. They actually cite 40 rapes per 100,000 when it comes to the US. Sounds like a number. I mean, we don't even know how large or small it is because there's no comparison. When it comes to India, all the Google searches will yield no results as to 100,000 per 100,000 rate. There is no rate. There is only a total given in a population of 1.4 billion. And I had to calculate it. The rate per 100,000 is 2.2 in the same year, 2022. It's come down to 1.8. But the rates of rape and counterpoint is that it is underreported in India. According to American statistics, there is 63 to 70% of underreporting in the US. So I can guarantee about 100% that our rates of underreporting are much lower than that. So there is no way that the American idea of women's safety in India or as a high trust society is, based on data. It is not based on truth.
It's on perceptions.
But also that is the perception that sort of, flows down the line to India because a lot of us are English educated due to our colonial past. So without a cohesive messaging that takes into account a studied approach to reporting on issues, how is it possible to, build media, influence narratives, and again, is there, we can't keep trying one by one now. What is the solution?
How many of our newspapers have resident correspondents in the United States, in Europe, in Russia? How many? I see only one person reporting for Times of India, Chidanand Rajgata.
Yeah, I was
Nobody
just
else.
thinking of the same guy.
We're a huge country. We run newspapers. Times of India has 6 front pages as ads. Then you get to the front page, the headline, जो हमारा front page हुआ करता था. We get to that after you shuffle through these damn 6 pages first. You get there. But we have no money to have correspondents in San Francisco, San Diego, or Houston, where a lot of Indians are living. They will be your carriers. They will carry your news.
So it is a lack of will, no?
Lack of direction, lack of will. Nobody wants it. How do you force Times of India or Hindustan Times or any of these newspapers that we will let you do this unless you have 6 correspondents in these places? And show me what they're saying. You must have one in Washington. You must have one in New York. नहीं, वो ऐसे ही चला रहे हैं. न्यूज़ देना है तो वहाँ से दे दी. Reuters and CNN and AFP. Nobody else is saying what is happening. Why doesn't an Indian correspondent sitting in New York says, this country, there is a rape, this city, there is a rape every other day. And these are the people. Let him file that report. उसको भगा देंगे.
Intelligence and narrative building. What is the overlap here, since, you've written about it? Apart from
Overlap.
please read the book.
Overlap of intelligence. Overlap तो यही है कि, when you want to build narratives, you have to do it discreetly. You have to do it in a particular direction. You can't let it be 100 minds working on the same theme and giving 100 answers. You've got to focus it. Then somebody has to do the channeling. Somebody has to put the thing on roller coasters or on trails, let it run in a particular direction without getting involved yourselves. So you establish, like they do, Americans, Amnesty International or this and that. They all create narratives. The Pentagon and the CIA have resident, within quotes, ambassadors in Hollywood, where they tell them if your film is aesthetically okay or whether it is factually correct or this is not how it is done. They actually allowed Top Gun to be filmed at one of their air bases with a genuine aircraft, to make it real. And what do we produce?
Patan.
This is part of the ultimate goal, by the way, for the audience.
Yeah. It is there. That till you sell your own story, nobody is going to bother about you. And it's not easy going to be selling stories because there are already entrenched interests there. And we are doing nothing to challenge it.
With regards to entrenching a story, there are certain terminologies that come into play that allow sort of whitewashing, justifying of things when it comes to the American support for terrorism from across the border, even for ourselves. Even I've written about, how they've always been called rebels and militants. They were never called terrorists until
No, they never called it gunmen.
2014. Gunmen.
Militant.
Yes, so that is...
Or freedom fighters also.
Freedom fighters, yes. They always, the... one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. That is how every death has been justified, including even in October 7th. So, what do you think of this? Are there some red lines that should happen when it comes to journalistic ethics with regards to terminologies and American influence on those terminologies?
We're not going to be able to change their terminology unless we change
our
ours.
Audience?
We won't change it.
No, but the way we cover our news itself, do you think that the government and the policy and the establishment can kind of, if not, crack down on some of these, establish guardrails at least in terms of what they should and should not do?
There can be sort of code of conduct. That, when a terrorist attacks, he is a terrorist. He's not militant. He's not...
Or a headmaster's son or something like that.
Doctor's son or headmaster's son, and you can't go around juppie-powering him. You don't do that. These are personas non grata, and they should be treated like that. And governments should lay down. There will be usual hullabaloo. No, this is all. If it's Congress, they'll say the Congress is at fault. If the BJP is doing, the BJP. But you have to make up your mind what you want to do. If you are not going to do it yourselves, why do you expect the other chap to do it? Why should the BBC do it? BBC turn around tartly and tell you, we call them gunmen. till proven otherwise. Kar lo, bas. So we have to learn to set the yardstick ourselves. He is a terrorist, is a terrorist. He is nothing else. His religion comes later. The first thing is terrorism.
There's a lot of, you've cited human rights violation previously, right? So how is it that the narrative has been so twisted that human rights are only of the perpetrator and not of the victim? Is the victim less human? Human rights violations are usually cited for terrorists. It's
Yeah.
not cited for their victims.
No, it isn't, yeah. Because it suits you to cite the human rights of the terrorist. It doesn't suit me to, if at that particular juncture I want to support this movement so that it continues to bother you, so I'll say you're harming this terrorist, you're violating human rights by torturing him, etc., etc. And promptly turn around and do the same thing yourself and say it is fine. That time the human rights are not an issue, and you fill up Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib with all these torture cells. So it's all matter of, there's no hard principle that is not to be broken. These are all matters of convenience. Your narratives are also matters of convenience. You've suddenly found that Saddam Hussein had WMD and he had Al Qaeda, and you proved it. You had that Colin Powell showing that little file in UNC, and they said there were 16 words that were used, etc., etc. You created a narrative and fell into a trap. I mean, they might have killed Saddam Hussein in the end, but what did they get? A Shia government supported by Iran. And then you had Mr. Bush announcing mission accomplished. Actually, they say the mission accomplished was not about the military victory, it is about returning to the petrodollar, because Saddam Hussein was quietly swinging to the euro petro scheme. So they wanted to bring him back. And that's mission accomplished for all the oil companies. So narratives are essential, narratives have to be made, but then how do you create a situation where people become receptive to your story? It has to be made attractive. It shouldn't be boring. It should be something he is interested in knowing. The first thing you have to do in any story is that I should be interested in learning about that. You can't force that story on me. If there is no interest in me or in myself, then why do you want to sell that story? I'm not interested. I won't watch it.
There's actually a research paper by, I think, Dr. Nidhi and Professor Ramesh Rao about stand-up comedy being used to present a certain view of the Hindu religion. There's a lot of content on social media when it is, influencer-driven. It's not just comedy, but generally there's a whole industry of YouTube channel that makes a lot of money. That slowly put on, like you said, they have to be interested. Then there's food channels that
Yes.
discuss certain things. So I think that's very true. But if we look at American media, it's plainly controlled. There is no interest-driven thing. It's just a single narrative, apart from Tucker Carlson, who's, I'm not sure how to cite him because he's also on an opposite end of a spectrum.
But he's entertaining.
He is entertaining. But apart from
I like him.
Sometimes he goes off. Then, he has Amy Vax come on his channel. But yes, he's done well to interview Putin at least and provide an opposite perspective. But mainstream media is plainly controlled. It's not really catering to interests.
It's
Is
part
that
of the deep state, no?
right? So is that
They're not
necessary?
controlled. It's self censorship. In sense that I will not give a news that is not anti-Indian. I will give a news that is anti-Indian or snide one.
Not
But
merely pertaining to India, but in general, when it comes to MSNBC and CNN and everybody, their heads, they literally just take people who've worked at the White House. I think Jen Psaki was the last one to go into MSNBC and then become an anchor. So these are people who circulate, like you mentioned, you work in the White House and then you go and become part
yeah,
of one company. Dick Cheney, he's for Halliburton, of course.
yeah, it's famous.
Yeah, but that's
Why? What
MIC,
about
but still.
this defense secretary? The defense secretary at the time Cheney was vice president. He
Oh,
was
yeah.
he was the boss of
Rummel.
that, huh?
Rumsfeld.
Rumsfeld.
Rumsfeld, sorry.
He was
Yeah.
he was the boss of a pharma company. He refused to quit, and he did take decisions that helped that pharma company.
So then these companies plow in money to smaller media organizations that influence larger ones. Then the larger ones are led by people from. So there is no way in a true democracy, and I mean ours is chaotic enough to be a truer democracy,
Yeah.
to truly bring out a single narrative. Then
I don't know how we will be able to position ourselves. It's like a climb like this, a steep one.
so about narratives, when it comes to the ongoing genocide of Bangladeshi Hindus, the past genocide of Yazidis, the exodus of the Kashmiri Hindus, all of this has happened, and now we have the Bangladeshis going through it again. And it is very carefully covered up by media narratives, and despite Dr. Jaishankar actually bringing it up, this has deliberately not gotten any attention. So is that part of the narrative? Is active suppression part of a
Yeah,
narrative?
not to tell a story is also part of narrative. I just put it aside. It didn't happen. That's it. But if it were another country and nothing happened, maybe 2 people were killed, and they'll make a story out of it. So, narratives don't have to be based necessarily on truth. You might have an element of truth. It's ideal if you have a lot of truth, but you can sell a story of attacking Iraq with WMDs, who had WMDs when he had nothing. So, it is not important to have stories with truth, but more dangerous, I think, far more dangerous, is to sweep it away. Because that is also a different kind of dishonesty. But I suppose these kinds of things are not really of great importance in statecraft. What you don't want people to know, we won't tell you. That's what I said. It is quite often self-censored. They know this is taboo, we won't do this story.
Last couple of questions before we wind up. Thank you again for being so kind with your time. I mean, we're almost 45 minutes past the time we budgeted. With so much of chaos, as you say, happening across the world, what are you most optimistic for going forward?
For us,
Yeah.
for India, I think, although our rise has come at a time when there's a lot of chaos, I think.
Is it because of the chaos? I mean, do you think that, let's say the China plus one policy that a lot of folks have been pursuing to diversify the supply chains, that wouldn't have happened if COVID had not happened?
Yeah, if COVID not happened,
Getting cheap Russian oil, for example, right? All of those things?
all those things have combined to help us get that
Impetus.
jump. And now we should not lose this. If we lose this, then we are finished. If we don't lose this, if we carry on building on it, I think we'll come out pretty much on top, and we will get what we want to get to number three economy by 2027 or whatever. It is surprising that when there's so much debris around you and you're rising,
Like the phoenix.
it's nice. It's a good feeling. I think I personally have a lot of confidence that the Indians' ingenuity to make the best of situations, alongside with the ingenuity to make the worst of some situations. But that's okay. That's that we are human beings. But we have a lot of talent. We should keep that talent here. We're sending it out. All the bright guys go out. Some of the bright guys only who can't afford to go out stay back.
Right. But I do see some sort of a reverse brain drain happening at the margin.
I do see people coming back.
Yeah.
In fact, even where we live here, there are 2 or 3 families who've come back. That we want to be now. We've seen enough that we want to be back here. So that's a positive thing, and I think unless we are positive and optimistic about ourselves, we won't get further. All we need is people get a government they deserve, no? They also get an opposition they deserve. So we got one. You have to have an opposition that thinks for India.
Yeah. Is that a worrying trend actually? I mean, because
Yeah, it's all. You ऐसा कर दिया उसने वो क्या ये क्या. What is your idea, man? What do you want? How do you see India? It's just a caste census. You give 800 rupees, कितना 8,000 rupees खटाखट. Is that economy? So you have to have a vision that the party must give. What is the leading opposition party's vision for India?
Subnationalism.
yeah.
Subnationalism. Is that for India? Now you go there and say, you can't, this chap can't wear a turban in India. You can't say that. Even if it were true, it isn't damn true, but he says that.
But he says that to an audience that will buy it, then process it, then bring it back to us, and then we'll believe it.
I don't know what he does.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, I think, the quote goes, right? I mean, Tata Praja Yata Raja or something. I always get it like backwards sometimes. Yeah. So,
Tatha Raja Tatha.
Yatha
exactly.
raja tatha praja.
Exactly. Right. So, but yeah, I mean, the way the opposition behaves sometimes is like really worrying actually, because the subnationalism that we brought up, right? You mentioned as well, and the second is like seeking foreign intervention actively on things,
Yes.
right? Like you're going and like arbitrating an Indian interest in the US, for instance.
It's okay that you go to America and say, help us. But our chap goes to Pakistan and says, help us. How ridiculous can that be? You can't just do that.
Yeah.
And we have to.
I know the agency is apolitical broadly, but how does the agency react to something like this? Like,
What can you do? What can you do? We laugh like the rest of us, or go up in anguish. You can't do anything. Our parties are not thinking of anything beyond the next election. They just want to win the next election. Bas. One nation, one election doesn't suit. ये तो मुश्किल हो जाएगी यार. Lot of difficulties will arise.
you did mention an upcoming book. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the book is going to focus on?
The book is focusing on the globe, how it's going down, and why.
Okay. I did want to end on a positive note, an optimistic note. So
No, but the last two chapters are positive. That's about us.
okay. Wonderful. So when is it going to be out, sir?
थोड़ा delay हो गया यार. It should have come out by now, but I think it will be end of November earliest. Because first we shifted, then there was illness, and there was other problems. Then the editor changed, and so it all got into a spin. And so I'm trying to compress it a bit.
So before we finally wind up, for real this time, so we have like a rapid fire round that
Oh, I thought this was a rapid fire round.
that our production team put together, right? Sagorika, you want to start things off?
Okay, I shall begin. Question 1. Should Indian agencies pursue a more aggressive approach towards dealing with anti-India forces?
Like
Yes.
CIA and Mossad.
Yes.
Okay. A historical event where the narrative was so effectively controlled by an intelligence agency that it significantly altered public perception and policy.
9/11, I think.
Yeah.
Which country has been most successful in crafting a global narrative that suits its geopolitical purposes and
US.
strategy?
Is there a close second?
I don't know, maybe China.
What is the biggest cybersecurity threat intelligence agencies are underestimating right now?
I think the attacks on infrastructure.
Is it more important to promote your own narrative or to discredit the adversaries?
You have to promote your own before you destroy the others.
Okay, I think we discussed this a fair bit, but anyway, I'm going to ask you for a short, concise answer to this. Considering the current global trends, what do you predict will be the next major challenge for intelligence communities worldwide?
Worldwide. Worldwide, I don't know, but I can certainly think of technology and its repercussions.
The pace at which it's changing?
Paces which is changing and the pace at which the Chinese are using it.
All right. So that's a
Pass
wrap.
ho gaya?
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I mean, you've been so gracious with your time. Really,
Nice
really
talking.
appreciate it.
I'd like talking to youngsters. They accept my word.
No, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for allowing Sagorika and me to ask you all of these sometimes naive questions.
No, it's
so,
good. No, they were not naive questions, they were trick questions.
With diplomatic answers.
I just speak my mind, that's it.
That's the best.